是非洲南苏丹这间孤儿院的大日子，因为这是创院10余年来第一次举办高中毕业典礼。
I'm actually feeling very happy and excited for this great, wonderful day. Now I have chosen to be a doctor after I finish the school.
而这间孤儿院里的其中一位幕后推手是来自美国的宣教士金伯利 Kimberly。当初他来到苏丹，长达6个世代的内战持续延烧，杀戮灭村、轮暴妇女早已不是新闻，数百万民众流离失所，孤儿比比皆是。他因此放弃原先舒适的生活、高薪的工作，把自己埋进这一块缺乏悲怆的土地里，成为当地人口中带来爱和祝福的 Kimberly 妈妈。
My little children.
她不只听见许多心碎的故事，自己也成为邪恶和暴力的受害者。然而，信仰的力量支持她走过死荫幽谷，并邀请人一起踏上苦难与恩典交织的精彩人生。
朋友们，你好，欢迎来到今天的真情部落格。对于我们大多数没有去过非洲的人来说，一想到非洲，可能大家会出现一些画面，可能就是饥饿啊，或者是很多的疾病。而今天来到我们现场的这一位来宾很特别，他在苏丹服侍了15年的时间，是一位美国宣教士。今天这位宣教士来到现场，要跟我们分享他的所见所闻，还有在他自己身上发生的一些故事。欢迎 Kimberly。Kimberly, welcome to be our guest.
Thank you.
Because for most of people here, we don't really know about Sudan. That is quite unfamiliar country for us. So at the beginning, could you please let us know more about Sudan?
Before, Sudan was the largest country in all of Africa during colonialism. But in 1956, Great Britain withdrew.
Yes.
And a terrible civil war started because radical Islamic Arabs had invaded in North Sudan, the northern part. And the oil is mostly in the southern part. And the Arabs wanted the oil that was in the southern part. And so they really forced all of the indigenous African people to move out of their way into different regions. But it became the most bloody civil war ever in history. And millions of women were raped and taken as sex slaves to serve the Arabs. Millions of men were killed so that they could take the women, and the children were just mostly left behind on their own.
Until now?
Until now. It's left a horrible mess. But in 2011, the southern part of Sudan became an independent nation. So now there are two nations, Sudan and South Sudan. But there are two very evil men, the president and the former vice president, who are taking the money from the UN and from the US, the aid that they get, and they're just, instead of building roads and instead of building hospitals that this money is to be used for, instead they're using it for their own personal gain.
Corruption.
And so the people are still starving.
Yes.
And they're not paying the soldiers, the Sudanese soldiers. And so instead, the government has sanctioned rape as a weapon of war. And so they tell the soldiers freely, you can go into these villages and you can pillage the village, you can take whatever you want, you can kill the men, you can rape the women, you can steal the goods. And so they put the women in camps where they just rape them and rape them.
It's really a war that for most of people here cannot imagine.
Right.
And you are a missionary of Sudan now, but when and how did you become a Christian?
Well, in my home, there were no Christians. And so when I was 11 years old, I heard the gospel for the first time.
In school?
No, I went to a church because they had vacation Bible school. And it was summer.
Yes.
And I was bored. And someone told me there were free cookies. And that there would be lots of games. And so I thought, okay, I will go. But when I went, the people were very kind.
Yes.
And I was poor. and I was dirty and I was not very well behaved, but they loved me anyway. And they shared the gospel. They told me that Jesus Christ had died so that I could live. And I thought, I was only 11, but I thought, I need a friend like that. And so I became a Christian, and I was sort of like John the Baptist in my family. I was always telling my family about Christ and hoping that maybe one day they would come to know. But I was a child, and they thought I was just being a silly child.
And for quite a long time, you were a CEO of a company before. So what made you to give up such a great job and become a missionary?
Well, when I was young, we were very poor. And I always felt like maybe something was wrong with me. I always thought I didn't fit in. And so when I was only a little child, I made a decision that when I grow up, I will become rich. I will make money. And so I worked very hard to have that American dream, to become wealthy, to become successful. And I was really good at it. I made a lot of money very young, even when I was still in my 20s. I lived in the right houses. My kids went to the right school. I had a handsome husband. Everything on the outside looked good. But you know, inside, I don't know what Jesus means when he talks about the abundant life. I came to give you freedom. I didn't know what that was because I felt chained to my mortgage, to always looking perfect. I felt chained to what people thought about me. I started crying out every day, Jesus, there has to be more. There has to be more. I'm still not happy. What's wrong with me? There has to be more. And so one day I was driving on my way to this corporate job. And suddenly I had this vision. It's kind of like a mental movie in my head. In this vision, this truck, it came out of a side road. It was a big truck with trees and logs on it. And it came plowing right through my car. And I flew out of my windshield and I tumbled across the windshield and onto the pavement, and I was dead. And God came to me in this vision and he said, I'm so sorry, your whole life is finished and there's nothing that is left for eternity. And I was surprised. I said, but God, I'm a Christian. I've been a good person. I don't do bad things. He said, yes, but everything you've done in your own strength. You've been living the American dream, not my dream. And so then I argued with him and I said, but look at my children. My children are very good children. They've been paying attention and they do soup kitchens and they go to homeless shelters and they go to church. And he said, exactly. They've been watching you and they're doing exactly what you're doing. They're pursuing the American dream. They just want to be good people and they want to be pretty cheerleaders and they want to drive nice cars. But nothing will matter because it's not building my kingdom for eternity. And it broke my heart. I thought, oh my God, I'm teaching my kids to only look good on the outside, but they know nothing about being willing to die for Christ. They know nothing, I know nothing about suffering. I've never really suffered. I've had pain, of course we all have pain, but I've never understood what it means to participate in the suffering of Christ that we are told to do.
You were about that 40 years old then?
Oh, not quite, but almost.
Yes.
By then I was in my late 30s.
Okay, so as a middle-aged woman, you have your own career and very wonderful family. You have your own comfort zone.
Yes.
It must be very, very difficult to make up your mind to make a big turn in your life and to become a missionary.
It was difficult because I knew Jesus tells us to count the cost. I knew I would have to take my children from their school, from their comfort zone, from their friends. I would lose everything that I had built my life around, and that wasn't easy. So it took at least a year of arguing with God and fighting with God and fighting with my husband before finally I surrendered.
So how did you start your missionary work?
At first, our church was asking us to go to Spain. They were telling us that Spain and in Europe, it's the least Christian continent in the world because the old ways of Christianity, they've died off and people have forgotten that. And so now it's very modern and they reject Christianity. And so at first, that's where we went. But it was while we were there that we found a brothel, a house of prostitution for little bitty children. The youngest was only about 6 years old, and the oldest was about 16. And all of them were African children who had fled Africa trying to come to Europe to find a good life, a safe life. But instead, people had taken advantage of them and were forcing them into prostitution, and then they would film it on the internet and sell it as pornography. It broke my heart, and I thought, you know, but by the grace of God, they could get my children. None of us are safe, and we have to do something about it.
And I know there was something happened very terrible because of the principal, even the principal of the orphanage.
He was molesting them, of course, himself also, but he told us that if we didn't leave, he would kill us. And I was scared. And so, of course, I wanted to leave. And then I realized I felt like Esther. Do you know Esther in the Bible?
Yes, yes. The queen.
And finally, she knew she was afraid. She didn't want to stand against the king.
Yes.
But finally, Mordecai told her, how do you know? Maybe you were born for just a time as this.
Yes.
And that was my Esther moment. I realized this is why I'm alive. I realized that the joy that Jesus promised would only come when I found why I'm on this earth. And it's to fight that evil that wants to harm women and children in such an evil way. And I looked at my daughters and I knew if I walked away and allowed that evil, they would never believe anything I said again.
So how did you do?
Because they threatened to take our daughters.
Yes.
And so we sent our daughters back to Alabama, our home, and they lived with friends and family so that they could be safe for a while we went to the government. But it turns out that the government, this was across the border in Portugal, and it turns out that the government was a part of the problem also. And many of the government officials, they were also raping the children and they were using them for prostitution. And so, of course, the government didn't want to do anything. And so it took us 2 years of fighting before we could get that brothel closed down. But finally, when the brothel was closed, most of the children were just sent back out on the street. And so, of course, they would just be used again. And that is when we decided that we must do something. That is when we formed Make Way Partners. And we must do something that will protect the children before they are taken as slaves. We must go to the places where the women and children are vulnerable and protect them before they're raped and before they're taken.
And then you went to Sudan?
Yes. You know, God, He's so kind. He's so gracious. When I was in corporate America, if He had said, leave your job because I'm going to send you to the war zone in Africa, I would have ran away like Jonah. But He didn't tell me that right away. It was step by step by step. And so when I had my Esther moment, it was when I saw the suffering of those children. And then I could participate in that suffering. And it made me a little more willing to take the next step.
But I think you still feel very afraid.
Very afraid. So it's kindness, God's kindness. It's very gentle. He doesn't force us to go. He doesn't make us to go, but He invites us. I could have said no. I could have at any point, even today. And sometimes I get afraid, or I get tired, or I get overwhelmed. And sometimes I still think about quitting. I think maybe no, I can go back. I think sometimes because it's very difficult. And so I wait and I pray and I doubt and I ask God, are you sure? Are you really sure? And I wait until I hear again. And I wait until he restores me again. And I don't have to go. Sometimes I can rest. And he gives me time to think before I go again. At first, I just slept out in the Sahara Desert or in the bush, just under the open stars. And hundreds of orphans would be around me. And at night, we slept with a stick by our side because hyenas would come in.
Oh.
And so when the hyenas would come, we would stand up and scream, and we would shake our sticks to try to scare away the hyenas.
为了让更多人了解苏丹的惨状与需要 ，Kimberly 成了空中飞人，经常单枪匹马地到世界各地演讲。过去，他同样只身踏上宣教的旅途，从美国到苏丹内陆，经历长达3天的飞行转机，穿过算不上是道路的泥泞之地，他终于抵达了内战、人口贩卖与性奴隶的核心。而等着他的是一个个需要被倾听与医治的生命。
And when we first moved the girls into the dormitory, we had 5 or 6 children that they were just collapsing and having seizures, and no one could figure out why. So we were doing all kinds of research. We were afraid maybe that there was something toxic in the paint, maybe we had done something wrong in the building. So we brought in chemists to take paint samples. We did all kinds of things trying to find out what was wrong. But it was just trauma. It was just trauma.
It is trauma.
最后 Kimberly 终于是到了苏丹，可他真没想到苏丹的状况有多惨，远超乎他当初的想象。So 15 years ago, when you first time were there in person, and I mean, how were the women and children be treated?
Oh, I was not prepared. I had never seen anything like it in my life. There were 10 women for every 1 man. Because when the soldiers would come in, they would immediately kill all of the men and rape the women. But they left the women alive. And so all of the women knew how to survive, but many of them, some of the soldiers, they had even raped them with sticks. And it would tear their uterus, and they would tell them, this is so that you can't make black Christian babies. And so they were bleeding, and they were leaking urine. And sometimes the UN would come, and the UN would drop food, maybe sometimes from planes. They would drop the food with parachutes, or sometimes they would bring it in, but they would not oversee distribution. And so even when the UN left food, most of the time the corrupt businessmen would come and take the food. And then they would sell the food on the black market. And so there was nothing available for the women, and they were just going out in the bush and trying to find leaves, and they would take a bucket of water that they would get from the river, and it was dirty. It had cholera, it had all kinds of disease in the water. But the women were just picking the leaves and the grass, and they were boiling it in the water, and that's what they were feeding their children. And so the children, they had diarrhea, and they were dying of malnutrition and dysentery. It was just, it was terrible. And I spent many months just listening to their stories.
And how did you feel about all this stories, all this tragedy story?
I wanted to run. Mm-hmm. Every day, I kept a calendar. And at first, I just kept thinking, all right, I'm going to check off this day. And I'm going to check off that day. And when my time is finished, I'm going to leave, and I'm never coming back. I will be finished. But then one day, I went to a refugee camp, and there was a little girl, and she looked to be maybe 6 or 7 years old. And they brought her to me, thinking that maybe I can help this little girl. But the medicine that we had brought, it was already finished. And there was nothing I could do. And her eyes were infected, and there were there was mucus running down her eyes, and she was very malnourished, and they wanted me to help, and I couldn't help her, but I knelt down on my knees in the dirt beside her, and something in me changed. It was only the Holy Spirit, because when I looked in her eyes, her name was Teresa, and when I looked in her eyes, I said, Teresa, I'm sorry. I have nothing to give you, but I promise you, I will go to America, I will go to everywhere in the world where they will listen, and I will tell your story, and I will find the money to come back and to bring you medicine and to help your people. That is when Jesus got in my heart in a very deep way, and it's like he made me one with the suffering. Their suffering was the same as my suffering in that day, and it forever changed me. You know, the book of Colossians tells us, the Apostle Paul says that it's my joy to suffer with the fellow Christians in the church. And so on that day, I left her, and I kept that promise. I went back to the US. I've traveled to many other places, and I've told the story of Teresa, and I've been raising money to help those people. But by the time I got back to Teresa had already died. And the women, they couldn't even tell me how she died because they had no doctors. They had no way of knowing what killed her.
So there is no one can protect them?
No. The very government that is meant to protect them, that's the government that is doing the genocide. See, we've had this now, this genocide. We've had it now for 6 generations. And so there is no one alive who was not born into war. Even their parents were born into war, and even their grandparents were born into war. And so it has reshaped the entire collective psyche, heart and soul of the people. And so there is no value for the dignity of human life.
How about humanity?
There is no humanity. There's no value left. There are only a handful. God always has his remnant, always. And there's a handful, a very small handful of faithful men and women. One of them I write about in my book. His name is James Lualatak. He is a very faithful man. Another one is Romano Nero Aguma. And these men, they come together and they're the ones who they lead the orphanages. We help them, we provide, Makeway Partners provides the money, and we provide the training so that these few faithful men of God, they're raising up children in a new way so that we can break that cycle of violence. Those children, one day, they will be leading the country. That's our hope. And they're not, instead of looking to the UN to be peacekeepers, we're raising up a generation of peacemakers.
Oh.
We just have to be patient.
But at the beginning, when you began to take care of these orphans, what was the biggest problem you had to deal with?
At first, I just slept out in the Sahara Desert or in the bush, just under the open stars. And hundreds of orphans would be around me. And at night, we slept with a stick by our side because hyenas would come in.
Oh.
And so when the hyenas would come, we would stand up and scream, and we would shake our sticks to try to scare away the hyenas. But you know, in 10 months, we lost 278 orphans. And the number one cause of death was from hyena attack, because they would eat them at nighttime. I couldn't protect them all. And that is when I knew we had to start building buildings. But see, no one had ever done it before. No one. And I didn't know if it was possible. And so I cried out. I thought, God, it's too big. It's a far-fetched dream. It's bigger than me. And he said, exactly. Everything that you were doing in the US, that corporate job, all of that money, see, you were doing that in your strength because you're a strong woman. But now I'm asking you to do something that's bigger than you. I'm asking you to trust me. You just be faithful. You tell the story, and I will bring you the funds.
So you went back to
the US and told the story. and tried to raise the funds, and we did. We raised millions of dollars because we had to bring, there are no supplies in South Sudan. There aren't bricks, there's not cement, there's not wood, there's not steel. And so we had to buy all of the supplies 2,000 miles away in Nairobi, Kenya. And then we had to hire drivers that would bring it, and there aren't roads, and there aren't bridges to cross rivers, and there are bandits and soldiers and bad people. And we had to bring all of those supplies through dangerous territory, lawless land, 2,000 miles.
How did you do that?
A miracle, because we never even lost one nail, not even a nail. All the supplies. The UN, they report every year that millions of dollars are stolen. We've never been robbed. We never have lost anything.
Oh, really?
In 15 years, we've never even lost a grain of rice. It's a miracle.
But during the process, have you ever, need to deal with some big challenge?
Of course, many challenges. And I think maybe the toughest thing was one day when this woman was dying, she cried out to her best friend. She said, "Please don't let my baby die. Promise me you will find a way to save my baby." And so this woman, she brought the baby to me, and she had it wrapped in rags. And the baby that now was maybe 3 or 4 days old. But the baby still had afterbirth and blood and feces all over the baby, hadn't even been washed. And the baby was so weak and dehydrated that even when I tried to give it water in an eyedropper, the baby couldn't take, the baby couldn't suck. And so every day, 24 hours a day, I just had to keep prying open the mouth and trying to get in the water, get in the water, get in the water. And then we took some goat's milk and we boiled the goat's milk. And again, it took many days. And so for 2 months, I took care of this baby. But finally, the baby was strong enough. And there was a woman in the village who promised she would take care of the baby. And so I gave the baby to this woman. And the baby had been gone for maybe 1 day. But then the friend, she came back. And she said, that woman in the village, she got afraid. And she put the baby back in the mud hut, and the baby's dying. And I got so afraid, and so I started calling for James, because no one else spoke English. But I couldn't find James. And I knew I should not go out alone, because I didn't know my way around the village very well, and because I was the only foreign woman. But I was afraid that baby was going to die. And so I went out looking for the baby, and I was calling for James, but I couldn't find him. And then I remembered that sometimes James would go down to the river, and he would pray and watch for the sun to set. And so I thought, maybe James is at the river. And so I started to make my way down the hillside to go to the river. But when I got to the bottom near the river, what I saw over there was a whole group of men wrapped in the Arab costumes. And I realized, I've gone to the wrong place. But it was muddy and I couldn't make my way up, and I fell. And before I even knew what was happening, they were on top of me. I didn't know the language. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but they just started screaming at me, and they were pulling my hair and dragging me by my hair, and they were kicking me. And one by one, they started to rape me. Suddenly, I heard a machine gun. And all of a sudden, those men in the white robes, they just started falling over like dominoes. And this black man, this large black man with this, he put this machine gun around him, and he reached down and he picked me up, and he carried me out from all of these men. He carried me up to a hill, but then, I don't know, I was just kind of crazy. I wasn't thinking right, and so I tried to grab his gun, and I was thinking to kill myself, but he knew what I was going to do. And so he pushed me down, and he wouldn't let me have the gun. And he helped me to get dressed again, and he helped me to walk all the way back to the compound where I was from. And I was just crying, and I couldn't see, and I laid down, but I couldn't sleep. And all of a sudden, I don't know, I was a little bit crazy. I don't know how much time passed. But all of a sudden, I looked out, and I saw coming towards me something in the night. I didn't know what it was, but something in my body, I think it was the Holy Spirit, just told me to sit. And I sat up on the edge of my cot like this, and I just put my arms out like this. And it was that woman. And she brought back baby Elijah to me. And she put that baby in my arms. And so the baby that I went to save, I had failed. But God brought that baby to me anyway. And I never wanted to let go of that baby again, because see, what I tried to do in my own strength to save that baby, God did for me. And now that baby, he's many years old. He's about 8 years old now. And that baby is happy, and that baby is alive, and he has a safe place because of the miracle that God did, and because that woman had the courage to go get him and bring him to me. And I spent a lot of time just out in the woods crying, telling God, I'm angry. I don't trust you. If you're really a good God, then how can you let this happen to these people? If you're really a good God, then if you asked me to go, why didn't you protect me? I asked all of those tough questions really for 4 or 5 years. I'm here to talk about the importance of equine healing, especially for patients with PTSD or women who have survived violent rapes or even children.
在遭受残忍的轮暴对待后 ，Kimberly 有很长一段时间深受压力后创伤症候群的困扰，需要接受专业的马术治疗与心理咨商，以释放她心中巨大的愤怒与哀痛。极大的创伤却使他更加义不容辞地重返非洲大陆，以相同的经历陪伴正在受苦的百姓。每当 Kimberly 要暂别苏丹的时候，他总是为孤儿院里的750个孩子一一祷告，正如同校歌里所唱的，新的生命即将展开，他因着苦难而与苏丹人民紧紧相系，然而他们也携手迎接人生崭新的盼望。
New life is coming up, oh yes. In the name of God there is a victory, in the name there is a victory, in the name there is a victory. New life is coming up, oh yes.
Kimberly 为了在苏丹的服事付上了极大的代价，甚至他自己也在那边受到了非常残忍的伤害。So Kimberly, were you mad at God how he could let this happen to you? How he allowed this to happen to you?
You know, healing is a process. It takes a long time. Maybe even today, 10 years later, I'm still healing. And so at first, I just locked it all away. And at first, I made a promise to myself I would never tell anyone. And I threw myself into my work and to taking care of baby Elijah and helping the other orphans. And I just didn't let myself think about it. But then when I went home and I had to start facing my husband, of course, things started to come back up. And I thought, I don't know how to do with this. And so sometimes I would drink wine and it would help me to forget. Or sometimes I would just work. and it would help me to forget. Or sometimes I would just do something fun with my husband and it would help me to forget. But then, inside of me, I knew none of those things would fix my anger. So it took a long time. I started therapy, first of all, and I had to be really honest. I spent a lot of that time. I like nature. I like to go out in the woods. And I spent a lot of time just out in the woods crying, telling God, I'm angry. I don't trust you. If you're really a good God, then how can you let this happen to these people? If you're really a good God, then if you asked me to go, why didn't you protect me? I asked all of those tough questions really for 4 or 5 years. I kept working, but of course all of my work was affected by that anger. And I think everyone around me suffered because even though the violence happened to me, it affected my children, it affected my staff, it affected my husband, it affected everyone. And eventually my husband, who I think is a godly man, he's a good man, but he just couldn't do it anymore. He just quit. He gave way to that and he asked for a divorce. And so it was a combination of learning that alcohol couldn't be my answer, my husband couldn't be my answer, even my work couldn't be my answer. Just many times just on my face before God, being honest with him. Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I don't understand, but God is bigger than my anger and he could handle it. He said, fine, be angry, cry, rage, shout, drink, scream, do whatever you have to do. But when you're done, remember, you still have work to do.
Did that come for you?
Not always.
Yeah.
The blessing, the real glory in that was for the first time in my life, I didn't feel shame for being angry. You see, I had been taught something in my head, and even with my husband, when I was angry, if I drank, or if I shouted, or if I was depressed, I felt ashamed, and so I would shut it back down and try to freeze again. And it wasn't until I said, enough of that. None of it's working. I'm going to be naked and ugly before God. And that's where God met me. He didn't meet me with a smile on my face. He met me when I was real. And sometimes, it's really easy to go to church and get caught up in being happy again. And it's okay to be happy. Sometimes I am happy. As a matter of fact, a few months ago, God brought a new man in my life. His name is Scott, and he brings me great joy. And he has gone to Sudan with me.
Did he have any struggle when he go with you?
Yeah, I think, it's scary for him. It's natural. A man, he loves his woman. He wants to protect her. It's natural. But the difference is he's willing to walk through those hard things, and he understands when I'm angry. And he understands when he can't fix it. Sometimes he wants to fix it, but he understands his limitations. He's a man too. He's just a man. He's not my God. I'm just a woman. I can't be his God. And so we both have to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling with God of our own understanding.
And how about your 3 daughters? All of them very supportive to your job?
They're very supportive. They're strong young women in their own right now. My youngest, she married a Sudanese man, and she's in nursing school right now. He is a Sudanese teacher, My middle one, she is in Colorado, and they are both serving the Lord and figuring out what their own journey is. And my oldest, it's the same way. They're married to 3 very good men, and God is working His own unique plan in their lives.
So they are following your steps in some way.
That's right.
But as a mother, don't you worry about their security when they,
When they go?
Yes.
Of course. I've taken 2 of my daughters there. And I've told you one of them married a Sudanese man. And so, of course, she will be going back. But I have to remind myself that just like I am a child of God, even though I love my daughters and it was my job to raise them, they're adult women now. And they're children of God first, not mine. He loves them even more than I do. I have to trust Him with them.
So after 15 years ministry work there, you already have 3 orphans. So what difference did you see on those kids?
The one on the border of Darfur is the oldest one. You have the Darfuris and you have the Dinkas, 2 separate tribes. And so there's a lot of ancient hatred among these people. And so maybe this boy knows that this one's father raped his mother. And this one knows that this one's father killed his father. And so we bring them both into our orphanage, and we put them in the bed side by side. Every night they go to bed together. And of course, there's an adult in there watching, supervising, making sure that they don't really kill each other, because they might. But instead, someone is praying with them each night, all night. And instead, when maybe they steal a piece of bread, we feed them 3 meals a day, but when they first come in, they're still afraid that maybe there won't be enough. And so when they fight or when they steal, we don't punish them. Instead, we sit them down and we talk to them about, there's enough. There's enough for you. You don't have to be afraid. And we give them an opportunity to talk about their story and to talk about why they're afraid. And sometimes they're angry and they're not going to talk. And it takes a long time. This is not a quick, just like my healing process, it's many years. It's not fast. But sometimes it takes a couple of years before they even begin to relax. And they realize we're not tricking them, that really they will be fed again tomorrow. And they will be fed again tomorrow. And day by day, they're hearing about the love of Christ, and they start thinking, this is different. Maybe this is a good way for me to follow. We don't force them. No one is forced to become Christian. No one, if they say, I worship Allah, we're not going to punish them. We just keep loving them in the name of Christ. And eventually those boys, they grow up, and you see them. There are many of them. You see them, and they're holding hands. And they're walking around the schoolyard, and they're holding hands, and they're laughing, and they're praying together. They call the other children together, and they say, let us pray.
And now you have new ministry plan?
Yes. This year we're building a hospital.
Hospital?
Because each one of our orphanages, they have a small clinic, but we can't do surgeries. And so if a girl is raped and she's only 10, 11, 12 years old, and she's pregnant, her body, it's too small. She can't pass a baby. And so many girls, they die in childbirth. But if we could do cesarean section, then we could save these lives. And if the women, they're raped with sticks and they have fistula damage and they're bleeding, we could repair them. It's very simple surgery. So we need a hospital with a sterile surgical unit, and that's our big plan. So right now, I'm begging Taiwan to partner with us and to help us raise the funds for this hospital.
And what is the greatest gain in your life through this missionary experience?
When we discover that unique dream that God had for us when He knit us in our mother's womb. It's not the Taiwanese dream, it's not the American dream, it's Jesus. What did you think of when you created me? So unique. No one else has my DNA. No one else has my fingerprints. What fingerprint is my life supposed to leave on this earth? And I have found that. And so I know that joy of the abundant life for the first time. I'm 53 years old, and it's been a lifelong journey to find it. And I know that peace, and I know that joy now. And that's why always when I sign my name, I sign love your sister along the journey, because that exciting journey with Christ, it still continues today.
At the end of this interview, is there anything else you want to share with our audience?
If we hear those stories and all we do is say, oh, that was tough. Oh, that was too much to hear. And then we walk away and we go about our busy lives just as they were before, then I feel like I myself have prostituted that child. I have cheapened her story. The way that we bring honor and dignity to the sanctity of life for those children who have died so needlessly is by letting it transform our lives, and we take action. We give of our treasures, our money, our time, our prayer to make a difference for those children.
今天 Kimberly 来到节目当中，很多分享的故事哦，是真实发生的，而那个世界我们真的是难以想象，真的只能说神的心思意念远远高过于我们的。我们只要确信，在他手中的计划都是美好的。确信这一点，有的时候当我们在看待完全无法想象的世界的时候，或许我们知道，我们定睛看着神，你就会了解，或试图去了解。可能隔了一段时间，我们会慢慢明白神的心意。Thank you。
神迹对许多人来说是生命当中一次神奇的记忆，但是对基督徒来说，神迹则是上帝在我们一生当中工作的痕迹。我相信对很多人来说，神迹你期望的是越来越顺利、幸福，你希望神迹带给你发财，神迹带给你家庭美满。但是你知道吗？在今天，我们透过 Kimberly 生命的故事，我们真是看到神迹，真是看到上帝的手在他生命当中工作的记号。只是你可能会很好奇，这怎么叫神迹呢？好苦！在他的生命里头看见的，都是一个又一个受伤的故事，不只是别人受伤的故事，包括了他自己受伤的故事。我相信，当你在听见这些受伤、受苦故事的同时，你一定会很怀疑。为什么 Kimberly 要放下在美国一个高阶工作的社会地位，然后回应上帝的呼召，去到一个非常战乱扭曲的地方？我想在 Kimberly 的生命故事里头，你会随着她的分享，你看到战争对一个人人性的扭曲，价值的扭曲，是这样的扭曲，让上帝将极深的爱和负担放在 Kimberly 的内在世界。亲爱的弟兄姐妹，对你来说，你渴望神迹吗？十字架是神迹一个最高的记号。对我们来说，很多人听到这个 Kimberly 生命的故事，会很纳闷：上帝，你怎么不保护他？他作为一个宣教士，在第一线为你服侍，你怎么忍心让他面对那么大的冲击和难处？甚至在这个冲击和难处当中，他还面对了婚姻的考验。但亲爱的朋友，这件事情正是十字架的痕迹。十字架的耶稣基督在上头，他说了一句话，他说：“主啊，赦免他们，他们所做的，他们不知道。”耶稣基督正是向着他所爱而那些不领情的人做出这样的祷告。同样的故事在 Kimberly 的生命里，他正是为苏丹的人民而去，但那里的人包括丑陋的人、丑恶被扭曲的人性，拒绝他，伤害他。在他的第一本书里头，他谈到的就是透过这些黑暗，他的服事越走越有力量。而在他的第二本书，希望所写的是透过盼望，他的服事又走进另外一个新的阶段。而这是什么？这就是十字架的工作，不是吗？耶稣基督的十字架经过3天的死亡，而后他复活升天，如今坐在天父上帝的右边。每一个十字架带出的爱， 都走过极深的黑暗，这个黑暗可能是别人对我们的生命伤害所造成的，我们可能找不到答案为什么，但是耶稣基督的受苦回答了这个为什么，他与我们一起在那个受苦的现场。亲爱的朋友，如果你正在面对极深的受苦，我邀请你来到十字架的面前，透过耶稣基督与我们同在一起受苦，我们一起经历他的安慰。我们来祷告。天父，透过 Kimberly 姐妹她生命的见证，我们看见那极深的黑暗，等候的不是眼泪伤心，等候她的是复活的盼望。我知道在我每一个人的黑暗软弱和破碎中，你要带领我们走过，并且再一次使我们看见极大的盼望是透过基督的复活所做成的。愿你将这个盼望放在我们众人的生命，好让我们见证十字架的恩典。祷告奉耶稣基督的名求，阿们。亲爱的朋友，你的生命也能够经历神迹，就是有十字架受伤并且复活的记号。